The wind had teeth that day. It howled low through the hollows and gnawed at the edges of her shawl, picking at the threads like it knew how little was left of her. Dust curled around her feet like smoke, the land stretching out before her in ripples of rust and bone, endless and merciless. Somewhere behind her, a buzzard wheeled. She didn't look back. Clara was already dying, though her heart had not yet stopped. Her mouth tasted of copper and grit. The sun peeled layers from her skin without apology, and the swell of her ankle, twisted wrong beneath her weight, had begun to pulse with a heat that felt angry, alive, like it wanted to argue with her for surviving this long. She had not screamed when Eli left her. Not once. It was not that she lacked the strength, or that pain hadn't carved a raw cry deep into her chest. But she'd known, somewhere past the shock, past the wild fluttering in her throat like a sparrow trapped in a bell jar, that no one would hear. And he would only enjoy it. His spurs had chimed as he turned back to the saddle. His words had been simple, even kind in tone. "You understand, don't you, Clara? You always were a weight I couldn't carry." And then he was gone. No backward glance. Just the sound of his horse growing smaller in the silence. Now she walked, or tried to. Half-dragged, half-staggered across the salt-cracked earth. One hand pressed to her ribs where the fall had bruised them purple. The other clutched the leather strap of the canteen he'd left, half-empty, maybe even poisoned. A mercy, perhaps. She hadn't yet decided. She remembered, vaguely, how this all began. Not just the moment he struck her or the sick lurch of the mule when he kicked her off its back. But before. The little things. The erosion of love. Eli had not always been cruel. When he courted her, he was full of golden talk, big plans, sharp boots, and promises that glittered like fool's gold. She was a preacher's daughter, unused to men with calloused hands and dangerous eyes. But he had smiled the way firelight flickers, warm and hungry all at once. And she, a girl desperate to be seen for more than her hymns and hemstitching, had mistaken danger for passion. He called her Little Dove back then, said she made the world seem quieter. And that might have been true, at first. But as the trail grew harder and the debts heavier, he began to hear her silence as insult. She could still recall the first slap, more shock than pain. He apologized with wildflowers, said she didn't understand the pressure he was under. By the time they reached the Arizona territory, he barely bothered to hide his contempt. Her quiet strength, once admired, had become something he resented. It made him feel small. Men like Eli could never forgive a woman for surviving what they could not. Clara's vision blurred. The light hurt now, not just her eyes, but her soul. The landscape shimmered like a fever dream, broken only by the occasional scraggly mesquite or the sudden scream of a hawk overhead. Her boots were split at the seams, toes blistered and bleeding. The hem of her dress was torn, the pale blue fabric stained with earth and worse. She fell once. Then again. The second time, she didn't rise right away. She lay there in the heat, cheek pressed to the ground, breathing in dust and trying to remember the sound of rain. It felt like a story someone else had told her. Once long ago, her mother had said the desert wasn't cruel, just honest. It gave nothing it didn't take first. Clara let her eyes close. Time passed. How much she didn't know. The shadows grew longer, stretching over her like fingers. Her lips moved, dry and silent. A prayer, maybe, or a goodbye. She thought of her sister, dead in childbirth, of her mother, gone in a winter fever back east, of the first time she sang in church, her voice trembling with hope. She thought of Eli's face when he smiled, and then when he didn't. The world narrowed to the sound of her breath, shallow and unsteady. And then, the horse did not gallop. Its hooves came soft, cautious. She felt them before she heard them, vibrations in the earth, small and rhythmic, like a lullaby played on a drumskin. Her heart tightened. Her fingers twitched toward the canteen. A shadow fell over her body. She tried to lift her head, but could not. Only her eyes moved, squinting upward through the lashes caked with sweat and salt. Not Eli. This man's silhouette was broad at the shoulders, quiet in the limbs. He dismounted without flourish, his bare feet making no sound against the cracked earth. Long hair dark and wind-matted, framed face she couldn't see clearly, only the stillness in it. A stillness like stone, like riverbed. He crouched beside her, one hand hovering in the air before it touched her forehead. His skin was coppered by the sun, his eyes a color she couldn't name. She flinched, expecting roughness. Instead, a water skin was pressed gently to her mouth. His other hand steadied her neck as the liquid touched her tongue, cool and earthy, like melted snow. He said nothing, not even in his expression. But in the hush that followed, Clara felt something shift, not in the land or the air, but in herself. This man did not see a woman broken and beaten. He did not look at her with pity or disgust. He simply saw her. That was almost worse. Almost too much. She wanted to speak, to thank him or ask who he was, but her voice caught somewhere behind her teeth. Her throat was raw, her body trembling like the last leaf before winter's snap. He didn't wait for her words. Instead, he lifted her, not with brute force, but with the care of someone who knows what it is to be carried when you cannot walk. Clara sagged against his chest. His heart beat slow and steady beneath her ear. The scent of leather, cedar, and dust clung to the skin. For the first time in days, maybe longer, she let herself be held. The wind sang around them, softer now. The sun had dipped below the hills, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. The desert, that cruel and sacred expanse, seemed to pause, to breathe. She closed her eyes. If death had come, it came with warm hands and silent steps. And maybe that was all anyone could ask for in the end. But something in her chest refused to quiet. A flicker, a spark. He began to walk, cradling her as if she were more than bones and bruises. She felt the sway of his stride, the firmness of his grip. Not a savior, no, not yet, but not a ghost either. As the darkness rose and the stars found their places, Clara let the silence fill her. And in that silence, something whispered, not words, not thoughts, but a feeling. You are not done yet. The wind, the earth, the sky, they all seemed to lean in closer, listening. And somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, she began to believe them. The hut was not large. It bent low beneath the weight of branches lashed together by careful hands, and the scent of earth and old smoke hung thick in the air. Shadows danced gently along the walls, painted by the trembling light of a small fire set in the center. Outside, the wind hissed softly, threading through the canyon stones like a sleeping serpent. Clara did not know where she was. She knew only the pain that hummed under her skin, less wild now, less screaming. Her ankle was wrapped in cloth that smelled of crushed sage and something sharper, something cool. The fever had broken. Her lips were no longer cracked open like desert clay, and the water she drank no longer tasted of death. But her body felt foreign. Every breath reminded her of the journey she had not chosen. She blinked slowly, the air hazy with smoke and light, and saw him again. He sat just beyond the edge of the firelight, still, carved from silence, his shoulders strong and unhurried, his movements deliberate. He whittled something, a piece of wood turning slowly into a shape beneath his blade. She watched his hands more than his face. They told her more. They worked with reverence, not pride. He was not creating to show her something. He was simply creating. She cleared her throat. The sound startled even her. He did not look up. She tried to sit and found herself breathing through her teeth, pain slicing sharp through her side. Her gasp brought his gaze to hers at last. His eyes were steady, dark, yes, but not the kind that swallowed. The kind that saw, that remembered. She felt small beneath them, but not weak. Just real. She opened her mouth again, unsure what she meant to say. Thank you, perhaps. Or who are you? But no words came. Instead, he stood and walked to her side with fluid quiet, placed a small clay bowl in her lap, and gestured toward it. It was stew. Simple, fragrant. Bits of wild root, maybe rabbit. She could not tell. But it was warm, and it filled the hollow places inside her that Eli had left behind. He spoke only once that day, after she'd eaten, when her eyes drifted closed and her body leaned into sleep like a boat tipping toward calm waters. She heard his voice, low, roughened by disuse. You are safe. Nothing more. Nothing less. When she woke again, it was morning. The canyon outside the hut was all red stone and golden light, tall and old and watching. She lay beneath a blanket woven in colors she could not name. Near the fire, the man knelt, tending a pot. The smell of wild mint and smoke touched the air. She watched him for a while before speaking. "My name is Clara." He didn't turn, but his hand paused above the pot. A moment passed, then another. Finally, his voice, slow and cool as water over stones. "Taza." She repeated it quietly. Taza. The name tasted ancient. That day, he helped her outside. The sun touched her skin like an old friend, gentler now, not something to fear. She leaned on a carved cane left by her bed, its surface marked with etched lines she couldn't decipher. He said nothing of the carving. He rarely spoke, but his silence was not empty. It was a space where her pain was not questioned, a place where her presence did not have to be explained or earned. She found herself filling the silence, not because he asked, but because she could. She spoke in pieces, like shedding skin. Of the farm she left behind, of Eli's shifting moods, the way his love curdled into contempt. She spoke of the night he left her, though not all at once. Those words came last, and with difficulty, like stones being drawn from a well. Taza listened. He never interrupted, never offered judgment, just listened, head bowed slightly, as if her story deserved a place in the world, no matter how broken. In the evenings, they sat beside the fire. Sometimes he brought her herbs to grind, small tasks that made her feel useful. Sometimes they said nothing for hours. And once, when she woke from a dream with tears on her face, he left a small carving beside her bed. An owl, its wings curved inward. A protector. He had carved it from the cane she leaned on. The owl's eyes were deep knowing. Clara began to change without noticing. She combed her hair in the mornings, smoothed her dress with care. She stood longer each day. Her hands, once trembling, grew steadier. She laughed once, just a small sound caught between surprise and joy, and saw something flicker in Taza's face. Not a smile, but something softer. She asked about him carefully. He answered in fragments. He had a sister, once. She died at the hands of men who promised trade but brought rifles. He was not old enough to stop them. He carried her memory in the beads around his neck, the ones he had strung himself. He did not ask her to understand. He only told her what was true. Clara listened, as he had. Her silence was not the silence she gave Eli, one built from fear and shrinking, but a quiet that held space for another's pain. They did not speak of what lay beyond the canyon. Not yet. It was as though they had made a pact without words. Here, in this narrow fold of earth, they would exist apart from what hurt them. But pain does not stay buried forever. One day, while gathering kindling near the stream, Clara heard horses, distant, echoing off the stone. Taza heard them too. His body went still, eyes narrowing toward the sound. She watched him then, the way his hand moved to the small knife at his belt, the way he shifted his weight, not ready to fight, but ready to protect. Her breath caught in her chest. For her, that readiness. The riders passed without incident. Just settlers, likely, heading east. But something had changed. That night, Clara sat beside Taza beneath the canyon stars. The sky stretched wide above them, bursting with constellations that pulsed like quiet promises. She turned to him, her voice almost a whisper. "I don't think I was meant to die out there." He did not respond at once. Then, softly, "No." She looked at him, really looked. The scars on his hands, the line of his jaw, the way his presence did not press on her, but steadied her. "You saved me," she said. His eyes met hers, unflinching. "You weren't lost, just left." The words hit something inside her chest that hadn't been touched in years. She swallowed hard, unsure what to do with the warmth rising in her throat. She looked away, then back again. "You don't have to carry me anymore." "I never did," he said. The fire crackled beside them, sparks spinning into the dark. Clara turned her gaze skyward, where a shooting star cut a silver line across the heavens. Somewhere deep in her, something shifted. Not healed, not yet, but beginning. She did not know what tomorrow held. But she knew this. She was no longer afraid of her own shadow. And beside this man, in this quiet place, she felt seen, not for what had happened to her, but for who she still was. The canyon whispered around them, warm and old and full of breath. Clara leaned back and let it hold her. The light had changed. It was in the way the shadows stretched farther at dusk, how the wind no longer simply passed, but seemed to pause, as if listening. The canyon that once felt hidden now pulsed with a fragile awareness, like the breath before a question is asked. Clara noticed it first in the silence between her and Taza, not strained, but fuller, a silence that carried weight, like river stones cupped in gentle hands. Her ankle had healed enough to bear her weight, though she still leaned slightly on the carved cane. The owl's gaze at its top had worn smooth beneath her touch. Each day she walked farther, her steps more certain, her body a slow reclamation. And yet, unease moved within her like a bird caged too long. The world beyond the canyon had not vanished. It simply waited. One morning, while Taza repaired a bough near the fire, Clara sat threading old cloth into strips for bandages. The air smelled of juniper and ash. A traveler approached, a wiry man with a mule and cautious eyes, and Clara's body tensed before she even saw him fully. She hadn't seen a white man since Eli. Her fingers went cold. Taza stood before the man could speak. His presence, calm but immovable, softened the edge of the moment. The man offered trade, news, stories. Taza declined most, but Clara asked softly if he carried any letters from the nearest town, Clifton or maybe farther. The man nodded, dug into a pouch. Name? Clara Whitlow, she said, voice steady. He handed her a torn scrap, a page ripped from a broadsheet, no envelope, no sender. She unfolded it with careful hands. A headline: Clara Whitlow declared deceased. Husband remarries heiress of Prescott Ranch. There was a likeness of her face, poorly drawn, yet unmistakably her. The words bit like frost. Not grief, not anymore, but insult. Absence twisted into narrative. He'd buried her without a body, rewritten her into something convenient, tragic, and forgotten. Clara, the good wife who vanished in the wild, a ghost to absolve the man who betrayed her. She stared at the paper until her vision blurred. Taza said nothing. He didn't reach for her, didn't fill the air with platitudes. He let her feel it. Later, as they sat beneath the cottonwoods that clung to the streambed, Clara spoke without turning toward him. I need to see it for myself. His silence was an invitation, not refusal. I don't want revenge, she added, more to herself than him. I want to end it. On my feet. She looked at him then, and something passed between them. Not promise, not request. Just understanding. Within a day, they packed light. Enough for the road, not the return. Clara wore a dress simple but clean, and a hat to shade her face. The owl cane rested beside her saddle. Taza rode close, silent as always. But his presence had grown into a comfort so natural she hardly remembered what it felt like to ride alone. The land stretched before them, the desert now a place of memory, not menace. Clifton came into view at sunset. A tired town, all creaking signs and dirt roads pressed flat by wagon wheels. It greeted them not with anger, but wariness. Two figures unfamiliar to each other and familiar to no one. The stairs did not surprise her. A woman thought dead and an Apache man walking side by side was not something people in such towns saw without flinching. She dismounted outside the general store. A girl sweeping the steps froze, her eyes widening. Clara gave her a gentle smile and walked past, her steps uneven but steady. Inside, she bought a comb. Nothing more. Then she asked quietly where she might find Eli Whitlow. The girl at the counter hesitated, eyes flicking to Taza. Then she nodded toward the saloon down the street. He's there most afternoons. Keeps company with the Prescott girl. Talks real proud. Clara walked there on her own. Taza did not follow, but waited in the shade across the street. She didn't need protection. Not here. Not anymore. The saloon smelled of sour beer and overcooked meat. Eli sat at a corner table, boots up, glass in hand, laughing at something half-heard. His hair was longer, his shirt cleaner, but his voice was the same, slick with charm and rust underneath. She stepped inside and stood still until he looked up. He paled. It was the only satisfaction she let herself have. "Clara," he said, half-risen. She did not respond with her name. She took 3 steps forward, came clicking against the wood. "You left me for dead," she said softly. The saloon quieted. He opened his mouth, closed it again. The bottle in his hand trembled slightly. "I thought you." "You didn't care whether I lived or died," she interrupted, her voice even. "You cared that I was inconvenient. You traded me for silence and land." He stood now, face flushed with something between shame and fear. He reached for her arm. She stepped back. "You don't get to touch me," she said. The silence in the room grew heavier. Eli's new wife, a young woman in a dress too fine for the town, watched with wide, wary eyes. Clara turned to her, not with malice, but clarity. "You'll see it too one day. That kind of man doesn't change. He just learns new lies." And then she turned and walked out. The sky was darkening, the air cooler. Taza met her at the corner without question, and they walked back to their horses without a word. She didn't look back. Not once. That night, by their small fire just beyond the town's reach, Clara sat cross-legged on her blanket, arms around her knees. She was quiet a long time. Then she said, "It didn't give me what I thought it would." "What did you think it would give?" Taza asked. "I don't know. Closure. Something clean." She shook her head. "But it just feels finished. Not better. Just over." Taza looked at her, his face in profile, firelight dancing in the lines near his eyes. "That's the thing about shadows," he said. "You don't kill them. You just stop walking backward." Clara let the words settle into her bones. She turned to him then, not with need, but with knowing. "You don't speak much. But when you do, it's always true." He met her gaze. And in that look, unspoken and whole, she saw something deeper than comfort. Not attraction, not desire, not yet. Respect. She reached for his hand. Not with ceremony, not with tremble. Just a hand finding another hand in the dark. He did not pull away. And in that quiet, beneath stars no town could dim, Clara realized she wasn't someone who needed to be saved anymore. She was someone choosing. The fire cracked beside them, steady and warm. The shadows behind her grew distant. And, in their place, the first flicker of something waiting. Not loud, not demanding, but real. Tomorrow could wait. Tonight, she was whole. The desert smelled of ash and rain. Not the rain that fell, but the kind that promised, far off, stitched into the clouds like silver thread. The sky above the canyon had turned the color of old bruises, streaked with light that didn't soften. Clara felt it on her skin before she saw it, the press of something coming, not quite danger yet, but close. Like a page turning just before the truth is revealed. They had returned to the canyon days ago, back to the quiet that once felt untouched. But quiet, she had learned, could carry echoes. And echoes carried names. The girl from the Clifton store had sent word, guilt laced with admiration. She had overheard Eli speaking of unfinished business, his voice bitter with embarrassment, loud with anger that had nowhere to go. A man like him didn't tolerate being made a fool of, especially not by a woman who had risen from the dead and dared to speak without permission. He had gathered men, writers, the kind that didn't ask too many questions. And they were heading west, toward where he thought she might have gone. He spoke of witchcraft, betrayal, collusion with savages. He needed a story more than he needed revenge. Taza listened as she relayed the message. His expression did not change. His hands remained still, though one rested near the edge of his knife. "We can run," she said, though she already knew the answer. He looked at her with that calm depth she had come to know, then shook his head once. "No, not again." She breathed in deeply. The canyon wind moved around her like a second spine. She remembered lying half dead in its belly, broken and small. And now, standing in the same place, Her voice no longer shook. I won't run either. Taza's eyes searched hers, not with doubt, but with reverence. The night before they came, she slept lightly, her dreams half-formed and hovering. In the dark, she traced the owl carved into her cane, the one he had given her when she could barely stand. Its eyes, though wooden, never looked away. When the morning came, it came without apology. The first rider appeared just before noon, silhouetted against the ridgeline. Then another. 4 or 5. Eli last. His horse better fed than the rest. He sat tall in the saddle, dressed like a man used to admiration, not dust. Clara and Taza stood on the rise above their home. No weapons drawn, just presence. Wind in their hair, earth beneath their feet, and history rising like smoke behind their eyes. Eli didn't speak at first. He let the image of himself framed by riders say what he wanted said. He dismounted with a flourish, the others staying behind like shadows with triggers. He stepped forward, just enough to be heard, not touched. I came for justice. Clara said nothing. Taza remained unmoved beside her. You poisoned my name. You spat on our marriage. Ran off with this. He gestured toward Taza, his voice thickening. This savage. Do you know what people are saying about me? Clara's jaw tightened, but her tone was calm, flat like stone. You left me for dead. Eli laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that cracked the stillness. I left you because you were weak. And now you want to stand here like some kind of prophet in dirt robes, thinking you're better than me? I don't think I'm better, she said. I know I'm alive. That's more than you ever let me be. He stepped closer, and one of the men behind him twitched, his hand ghosting near the rifle at his hip. I should have put you in the ground that day, Eli said, low and venomous. Would have saved me the embarrassment. Clara didn't flinch. She took one step forward. You already buried me. What you didn't expect is that something would grow. Taza didn't speak, but his presence pulsed beside her like a heartbeat. He had taught her this, the strength of stillness, the power in refusing to shrink. Eli's hand moved fast, too fast for thought. The pistol came free from his belt in a blur. Taza shifted forward, but Clara was faster. She stepped between them, her voice cut through the canyon like a blade. No more. The words stopped him, stopped the men behind him, stopped even the wind. Go ahead, she said. Shoot me. Finish what you started. Prove to everyone that the only way you can silence a woman is with blood. Her eyes held him, steady, clean. Eli hesitated. For the first time, his hands weren't sure. His jaw tightened. Sweat bloomed at his temple. You're nothing, he said, more to himself than her. You were always nothing. Clara took one more step, close enough that he could see the scar on her cheek, the strength in her spine. I was never nothing, she said. You just couldn't see anything you didn't own. Eli's hand dropped, not by choice, but by defeat. His shoulders sagged. A man who had never faced the mirror of what he was. He turned to the others, but they did not lift their rifles. They looked at Clara, then at Taza, then at Eli again, and they stayed still. Men like Eli needed an audience. And now even that was gone. Without another word, he mounted his horse. His face was pale with something like fear and something worse, insignificance. They rode off. No gunfire, no glory, just the sound of hooves retreating and dust breaking in the wind. Clara stood long after they disappeared. Her breath came slow. Taza stepped beside her, not touching, just near. As always, she turned to him, and for the first time since her healing began, her smile was not small or cautious. It was full, like something reclaimed. I didn't need to kill him, she said, softly. Just had to stop being afraid. Taza nodded. He looked out over the land, the ridge, the place where Eli had disappeared. Then back to her. You're free now. Clara shook her head gently. No. I was free the moment I stopped waiting for him to see me. The sun dipped lower, casting light that turned their shadows long and golden. That evening, they built a fire not out of necessity, but celebration. The flames danced high, orange and alive. Clara sat close, the warmth painting her skin. Taza added cedarwood, the smoke fragrant and bright. They didn't speak of what had passed. The silence was no longer heavy. It hummed with the presence of two souls no longer hiding. Clara watched the sparks rise, each one lifting like a memory, released. Her hand found his. No declaration, no urgency, just fingers meeting in the space between them, where pain had once lived and something truer now began. Love, when it came, didn't rush. It didn't demand or conquer. It arrived like the fire, quiet at first, then steady. Something earned. She leaned her head to his shoulder, and the night, once feared, became a sky full of light. Far off, thunder rolled, soft and slow. But it brought no fear, just the promise of something new. Clara closed her eyes. She had survived the man who buried her. She had chosen the one who saw her rise. And in that rise, she found not just life again. She found herself. The wind carried the last of autumn across the plains like a whispered farewell. It pulled at the brittle stems of grass, coaxed dry leaves into dance, and pressed cold palms against the windows of the one-room schoolhouse where Donna Benton stood, watching the world empty itself of color. Inside, the room was still, too still, as if even the desks had given up waiting for children. She moved slowly between the rows, fingers grazing the worn wood, each groove a memory etched by restless hands and hopeful hearts. The blackboard bore faded traces of a lesson unfinished, arithmetic no longer needed by a town that had decided learning was a luxury. Donna took a damp cloth and wiped it clean, the motion final, like sealing a letter no one would read. She closed the shutters, one by one, their hinges groaning like tired bones. The last of the firewood lay in a quiet pile by the stove, untouched. No one had brought more in weeks. The stove was cold now, its iron belly hollow. Her blue shawl, hand-stitched from scraps of her late husband's uniform, hung loosely over her shoulders. It carried the scent of lavender and ashes. She wore it not for warmth, but for memory, her only companion in the slow unraveling of her days. Donna stepped outside. The schoolhouse door creaked behind her and clicked shut with a sound too loud for so quiet a world. The sky above was pale and endless. A crow cawed in the distance, its cry cutting the silence. She walked the narrow path toward her cabin, boots crunching the frost-bitten earth. The town loomed far behind her, a cluster of buildings that had grown colder than the coming snow. Once, they'd welcomed her with baked pies and nods of polite respect. But after Thomas died and she took up the school post without a man to shield her, the warmth faded. Whispers bloomed like thistle, too bold, too soft, too strange. The final blow came when she refused to turn away two children of Lakota and settler blood. Not fit to teach, they said. Best move on. But she hadn't. She stayed. She stayed because no one else would teach them. Because she didn't know where else to go. Because a part of her still believed a fire could be lit even in a cold room. That belief was shrinking now, curled up like paper near a dying ember. The cabin greeted her with silence. The roof sagged slightly from the last storm, and the door stuck on its frame. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was tidy in a way only necessity could make it, each item in its place, no room for excess. The hearth was empty. Her fingers ached with cold. She knelt and lit a small flame from the last of the oil. It danced for a moment, fragile and uncertain. The shadows stirred, then settled. Supper was a heel of bread and boiled nettle tea. She sat on the wooden stool, hands wrapped around the warm tin mug, and stared into nothing. They hadn't said it directly, the townsfolk, but the message was clear. There would be no supplies sent her way, no firewood, no food. No one would fetch her when the snow deepened. They expected her to leave, or to stay and vanish, quietly, properly, without spectacle, like a story no one told anymore. She could feel it in the way their eyes slid past her in the mercantile, in the way Reverend Pike avoided her in the street. Even Eli Branson, who once promised to marry her before Thomas returned from war, now passed by as though her face had blurred. He had said it gently, at first. You need a man to survive out here, Donna. And then, sharper. Some of us don't want trouble. She smiled bitterly at the memory. Trouble, it seemed, was being a woman who wouldn't lie down and disappear. The candle guttered. She pulled her shawl tighter and moved to her desk, where a half-used journal waited beside a stub of pencil. It had been Thomas's. He used to write letters he never sent, things he couldn't say aloud. She'd taken up the habit since his death, writing notes to the silence. Her hand trembled as she wrote. November 16th. They will not return. I believe I am meant to vanish here, but I do not wish to die. Not yet. She paused, pencil hovering. If someone ever reads this, know that I tried. I tried to be kind. I tried to teach. I tried to be what this place needed. But the wind is louder than my voice, and the cold more faithful than any friend. The candle flickered out. The room deepened into darkness, but Donna did not rise. She sat still, listening to the moan of the wind and the brittle sigh of the wood. A sound broke through, the lightest scuff of snow against the doorframe. Her heart leapt. She turned sharply. But it was only the wind rearranging what little life remained outside. She moved to the bed, wrapped herself in quilts too thin for the night to come, and watched her breath curl in the air like ghost smoke. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. A reply echoed back, low and near. She closed her eyes. Her final thought was not of the town, or of the ones who left her. It was of the children who had trusted her, of their dark eyes wide with wonder as she told stories, their small fingers clutching books too big for their laps. She whispered their names like a prayer. Then the snow began to fall, slowly, softly, as if it were tucking her in. The snow arrived not with fury, but with silence. It fell in the hush of early morning, when the sky turned to pale, aching gray, and the world beneath seemed to hold its breath. Flake by flake, it covered the plains, softened sharp edges, buried broken things, and erased paths not recently walked. By the time Donna stirred beneath her threadbare quilts, the cabin had grown cold as bone. Her breath rose in misty tendrils. She sat up slowly, joints stiff, shoulders curled inward against the chill. The fire was long dead, the last log reduced to a heap of exhausted ash. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, stood, and nearly stumbled from the wave of weakness that swept through her. 3 days now, maybe 4, she'd eaten only a few spoonfuls of boiled cornmeal and the last of the root vegetables gone soft in the cellar. She hadn't kept track. Hunger blurred time into fog. The wind sighed through the gaps in the cabin wall, slipping between the boards like an old ghost searching for a name. Donna pressed her hand to the window pane, now rimed in ice. Outside, the prairie was vanishing beneath white. No tracks led to her door. No chimney smoke from neighboring cabins. The town had turned its back, and now winter did the same. She pulled on her boots, their soles thin and worn, and opened the door. The cold struck like a slap, fierce and intimate. Snowflakes swirled in the wind. Tiny feathers caught in a breathless current. She stepped outside anyway. The cold might take her, but staying inside would only make it slower. She walked, past the stilled schoolhouse, past the frozen trough and fence line leaning with age. Her legs trembled, her breath rasping. She called out once, not a name, just sound, but it vanished before it could travel. The weight of the snow pulled at her coat. Her vision narrowed. The wind howled louder, less like weather and more like morning. She didn't feel herself fall, only that the sky turned away and the ground rose to meet her. Donna's body crumpled beneath a spruce tree at the edge of the wild, her frame slight, hair loose across her cheek, breath soft and shallow. The snow did not stop falling. Hours passed. The day dimmed into dusk, that quiet hour where the sun has not yet died, but the night begins its claim. And in that blue-shadowed moment, a figure moved through the trees. He rode alone, as he often did. A tall man with a face carved by wind and time, skin the color of canyon stone, eyes sharp and steady beneath a fur-lined hood. The horse beneath him was coal-dark and sure-footed. Tahu had not intended to ride this far. He'd been hunting, silent, efficient, respectful of the land. A rabbit hung at his saddle. He followed no road, only instinct, and the quiet signs the earth left behind. But something had drawn him here. A disturbance in the pattern. an absence where there should have been presence. The horse halted near the tree line, ears twitching. Tahu's gaze fell to the snowdrift beneath the spruce. A patch of blue, a shape too still. He dismounted without haste, approached carefully. Snow clung to her eyelashes, her lips slightly parted. One hand lay in the drift, the fingers red with cold. She was not yet gone. He crouched beside her and placed 2 fingers at her neck. A pulse, faint, fluttering, like a bird pressed beneath water. He touched her cheek. Her skin, though chilled, held a trace of warmth beneath the surface. Tahu did not speak. He never wasted words where action would do. He lifted her with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his size. Her head lolled against his shoulder. The horse nickered softly as he mounted with her in his arms. They rode back through the snow in silence. His camp was not far, a modest shelter tucked beneath the lee of a hill, built of logs and hide, smoke trailing from a flue. He laid her on the furs beside the fire, stoked the flames higher, and set stones to heat near her limbs. He stripped off her damp coat, her boots, tucked her beneath blankets, still warm from his rest. Her lips were cracked, her brow hot. Fever had already begun its work. Tahu brewed willow bark in a tin pot and fed her sips between murmured breaths. She did not wake, but her fingers twitched in dreams. All night he watched her. Outside, the wind wept and the snow deepened. By dawn, the storm passed, leaving the world wrapped in silence and white. Donna stirred. Her lashes fluttered. She turned her face toward the warmth and whispered something, soft, too slurred to catch. Tahu didn't answer. He only placed another log on the fire and set a basin of snow to melt. For the first time in days, the cabin held life. And still, neither of them knew the other's name. The sun rose slowly, uncertain in its light. And far off, unseen by either of them, faint tracks led from the spruce tree to the shelter. Just footprints in the snow, already beginning to fade. Morning light spilled across the cabin floor in a soft golden ribbon, warming the worn wood where Donna's hand rested. She stirred beneath the furs, the scent of smoke and pine surrounding her. Her throat was dry, lips cracked, and limbs sore as if she'd been held underwater and carried back. For a long moment, she didn't move. She only listened. No voices, no clamor, just the crackling of fire and the quiet murmur of wind pressing gently against the walls. Then a shape, still and silent. A man. He sat across the room on a low stool, whittling a piece of cedar with the calm focus of someone used to stillness. His hair was dark, tied at the nape, his posture easy but alert. Lines traced his face like riverbeds, weathered, solemn, watchful. Donna's breath caught. Her fingers twitched beneath the blanket. He didn't look up, but she sensed he knew she was awake. She tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. He stood without a word and poured water from a tin kettle into a wooden cup. He held it out to her. She hesitated, then took it with both hands. The warmth shocked her, aching as it spread through her chest. "Where?" she began. "You were in the snow," he said quietly. His voice was low and rough, not unkind. "You nearly didn't come back." She nodded slowly. 1,000 questions tangled behind her lips, but none escaped. He returned to his stool. The rhythm of the blade resumed, steady, soft, like breath. Outside, the snow gleamed under a cloudless sky, thick and undisturbed. The world had gone quiet, sealed in frost. Days passed like this. He would leave early, returning with fish or snares full. She watched from her pallet as he cleaned them with careful hands. She tried to help once, stood too soon, nearly fell. He caught her, without comment, set her down again, and returned to work. At night, he cooked simply, roasted meat, roots warmed on stones, pine tea. They shared the food, without speech. Words felt too sharp for such a soft space. Donna healed slowly. The fever ebbed. Her strength returned like spring beneath the snow, quiet, persistent, unnoticed until suddenly there. She spoke more, not at him, but into the air, as if to remind herself that her voice still worked. She recited nursery rhymes, fragments of poems, stories once read to children in the firelight. He didn't interrupt. Sometimes he would pause his carving, listening without turning his head. It became a kind of rhythm, his silence making room for her sound. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the pines, she looked over the carved shapes that had begun to collect on the shelf. Small animals, a bird in flight, a horse mid-gallop, a schoolhouse, its tiny windows cut with care. "You made these?" she asked. He gave a short nod. "They're beautiful." Still, he said nothing. But she saw something shift in his eyes, an almost smile, quickly gone. She told him her name, Donna Benton. He waited a beat, then said, "Tahoe." She let the name settle between them like an ember. Later, she asked where he came from. He only answered, "North of the river." Before. That was enough. There was a gentleness to him not born of softness, but restraint. Donna could sense the weight he carried, not heavy in his step, but in the stillness between movements, like a man who'd learned not to take more than needed, or speak more than asked. One night, as the fire wore low, she spoke of Thomas, her husband, buried in a faraway field, his name carved into a stone she'd never seen. "He was brave," she said, "but not for me, for country, for duty. I don't think he ever really saw me." Tahoe didn't look up, only set down the feather he'd been shaping. After a long pause, he said, "Some men see the world clearer when they stop trying to own it." Donna looked at him, surprised, not by the thought, but by how much it felt like something she'd once needed to hear. She felt herself unfurling, day by day. Not blooming, she was not young, not new, but warming, like coals finding breath again. She mended his shirts, careful not to overstep. He left his tools out for her to use. They fell into a quiet partnership, two people, neither lost nor found, simply continuing. One morning, while she stirred the fire, she caught him watching her, not with hunger or pity, but attention, as if her every movement meant something, as if she was no longer a ghost in her own life. It startled her more than any rifle shot. She dropped the iron spoon. He bent to pick it up, and when their hands brushed, she felt the heat of his palm through the cotton. Neither moved away. "I thought I was done with being seen," she said, so softly it nearly didn't escape. "You weren't," he answered. The silence that followed was not awkward. It was reverent. They sat by the fire long after the stew had cooled, listening to the wind outside, no longer mourning, just moving. In the distance, a wolf called out. A second replied. Donna turned to him, her voice steady now. "Do you think the world would let me live out here? With no town, no name they respect?" He considered this, then said, "It's not about the world. It's about whether you want to live or just survive." And for the first time in years, she didn't have to answer right away. The fire snapped. The night deepened. Outside, the snow began to fall again, but softer now, as if the land itself had exhaled. The smoke reached them first, a gray thread unraveling through the pines, rising against the pale sky. Tahoe spotted it before Donna did. He stood at the cabin threshold, still as a carved figure, eyes narrowed. Donna followed his gaze, her pulse beginning to thrum in her ears. It wasn't the steady curl of campfire or hearth. This was sharp and sudden, the kind of smoke born from urgency. She stepped beside him, wrapping her shawl tight against the wind. Far off, where the trees gave way to open land, movement stirred. Dark shapes against snow, drawing closer. Riders. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Tahoe moved quickly, dousing the fire and pulling the door shut behind them. Donna's heart beat a ragged rhythm as she gathered her few possessions, a tin of tea, the wooden schoolhouse carving, her journal. She paused at the hearth, eyes lingering on the warmth they'd shared, then turned away. By the time the riders came into full view, the snow had begun to fall again, light, deceptive, as if the sky meant peace. 5 of them. She recognized 3. Reverend Pike rode in front, his black coat flapping like a preacher's shadow. Behind him, Mr. Lawson, the man who'd signed her dismissal from the school board. And then Eli Branson. Eli had once held her hand in the orchard behind her cabin. He'd said she laughed like June light. He'd also been the first to disappear when her husband died, and the first to cast his stone when she stayed behind to teach children no one wanted. They dismounted a few paces away. No greeting, no pleasantries. Only that old, metallic silence that came before judgment. "You're alive," Reverend Pike said, as though it were a sin. Donna stood tall, though her knees felt brittle beneath her. Tahu said nothing, but stayed close, silent, steady. Lawson cleared his throat. "We heard someone's been keeping the schoolteacher alive. Thought we'd come see if it was true." Donna didn't answer. Let them say what they came to say. Eli stepped forward, his hat in hand, his eyes flickering like someone half sorry and half furious. "You could have come back to town, but instead you let yourself be kept." Donna's voice, when it came, surprised even her. Clear, measured. "No one kept me. I survived. He helped." Pike scowled. "You're living out here with one of them." He glanced at Tahu, as though he were something wild and dangerous. "There's still time to make things right, Donna. Come back. Teach the proper children. Restore your name." "My name doesn't need restoring," she said. "You just stop saying it." Eli stepped closer. "We brought supplies. Enough to get you through winter. But only if you come back now. Alone." Tahu's jaw tightened, but he still didn't speak. "And if I refuse?" Lawson shrugged. "Then you're no longer our concern. Next time a storm rolls in, don't expect help. Don't expect a grave, either." The threat lingered like smoke between them. Reverend Pike reached into his saddlebag and tossed something into the snow. It landed with a soft thud, metal flashing once in the weak light. Donna stepped forward and saw it. Her locket. The one with Thomas's picture. She hadn't realized it was missing. Eli's voice was quieter now, but not gentler. "You're not who you used to be." "No," Donna said. "I'm not." She bent, picked up the locket, brushed the snow from its face, and tucked it into her pocket. "That's your answer, then?" Pike asked. "It is." They left without another word, their hooves cutting deep into the snow, leaving a trail that vanished as quickly as it was made. When they were gone, Donna stood motionless. Her chest ached, not from fear, but the old wound of being cast aside again. She'd expected it. But expectation didn't dull the sting. Tahu walked to her, his hand open. In it, a small twig of cedar, freshly carved. A school bell. She took it, her fingers curling around the tiny piece of wood. "I should be afraid," she said. "But you're not," he replied. "No," she said. "Not of them." That night, they didn't speak much. The fire was warm, but the silence had grown heavier. Tahu stood near the door, watching the darkness as if it held answers. Donna watched him, studying the set of his shoulders, the way he stood like a man always waiting to be asked to leave. "I don't want you to go," she said, suddenly. He turned to her, surprised. "You think I would?" he asked. "I think you've left many places before. People, too." Tahu nodded. "Sometimes leaving is the kindest thing. But not now." "No," he said. "Not now." Later, as the wind quieted and the firelight danced across the walls, he sat beside her. She took his hand without ceremony. His fingers, calloused and warm, wrapped around hers like they'd done it 100 times before. There was no need for promises. No confessions. Just presence. And then, in the stillness between breaths, he leaned forward and kissed her. Not hungrily. Not possessively. Gently. Like a man who knew what it meant to lose and still chose to love. Donna closed her eyes. She let the warmth flood her, not from fire or flesh, but from the simple, breathtaking fact of being wanted, not for what she'd endured, but for who she still was. When they finally pulled apart, there was no awkwardness. No fear. Only a shared breath and the soft rhythm of the world carrying on. She touched the carved bell again, its tiny form smooth in her palm. Let them come, she thought. Let the town forget her name. Let them burn what they feared. She had not been saved. She had survived. And she had been seen. The thaw came slowly, like forgiveness. Snow receded from the hilltops first, then the flat of the valley, where the grass returned in cautious strands. Streams began to run again, pushing past the ice that had bound them. Trees wore buds like secrets, not yet ready to bloom. Even the wind changed its song, less mourning, more breath. Inside the cabin, Donna stood near the window, watching the first crocuses push their way through the earth. Her fingers were stained with ink and dirt, and her blue shawl now bore small patches where she'd mended it with fabric from Tahu's worn shirts. It no longer looked like mourning. It looked like a life remade. She had begun teaching again, first Tahu, who already knew more than he admitted. Then the orphan boy from a homestead west of the ridge. Then 2 girls with mothers too tired to say no. The schoolhouse had no desks left, so Tahu carved more, 1 each week. Quietly, lovingly. His hands, once built for bow and blade, now shaped futures from pine. They didn't speak of the town much, but it spoke of them. Rumors, like weeds, took root again. Whispers returned on boot heels, some bitter, some curious, a few laced with old guilt. Still no one came. Until they did. It was near dusk, the horizon burning gold and blood. Donna was gathering books when Tahu stepped inside, his face unreadable. They're coming. How many? 5. Maybe 6. All men. She didn't ask who. She already knew. The townsfolk had not taken kindly to her refusal. And now, with her living as she pleased, with who she pleased, something in them had stirred to action. A need to reclaim what they had lost, not her, but control. Do they have rifles? She asked. Yes. She nodded, her heart a steady drum. Then I'm not hiding. Tahu didn't argue. He simply began to move, a blade strapped to his belt, though she knew he would use it only if there were no other way. He wasn't a violent man. He was a man who had survived violence and come through gentle. That was rarer and braver. She donned her shawl, braided her hair, took the locket from the shelf and slipped it into her pocket, not for protection, but for remembering. She had been someone's widow. She had been forgotten. And now, she was something else entirely. They waited outside as the men rode in, kicking up dust that hung in the evening light like ghosts called back for reckoning. Eli was among them. Of course he was. His face, once flushed with charm, now pinched with resentment. Still playing teacher? He called, his voice tight. Still pretending to be a man? Donna replied calmly. He sneered. The others dismounted, moving with the clumsy tension of people unused to facing those they'd condemned. One carried a rifle, another a torch not yet lit. We warned you, said Reverend Pike. You were given a chance. And you gave me your silence when I needed anything, but... This is a Christian town, one muttered. Donna stepped forward. Then act like it. Tahu stood beside her, arms loose at his sides. No weapon drawn. Just presence, calm and unshaken. Eli raised his rifle. You've embarrassed me long enough. Donna didn't flinch. Is that what this is about? Your pride. You think we'll let you rewrite the order of things? A woman living out here. With him? Teaching half-breeds. Tahu's eyes narrowed, but he didn't move. His stillness was sharper than any blade. We are not rewriting anything, Donna said. We're remembering what you forgot. Eli stepped forward, aiming now. The others hesitated. Doubt crept into their stances. Donna's voice did not rise, but it rang like iron struck clean. You left me to die. He didn't. You cast out children. I welcome them. You claim righteousness, but you ride with fire. Eli's hands trembled on the rifle stock. You're not the victim here, she said. The torch-bearer shifted uncomfortably. We shouldn't be doing this. No, Pike said. We should have done it sooner. Tahu's voice broke through then, low and clear. Enough. The rifle jerked toward him. But before Eli could move again, a single sound pierced the moment. The sharp, innocent ring of a bell. From behind them, down the path leading from a schoolhouse, came the clear tones of laughter. Children. 3 of them, holding hands, walking toward the cabin, unafraid. One of the girls clutched the wooden bell Tahu had carved, ringing it like a greeting. The men froze. The children stopped a few paces away, looking up at the adults with the blunt honesty only the young possess. Miss Donna, said the youngest, are these men lost? Donna smiled gently. Yes, sweetheart. I think they are. Pike turned away, shamed. Eli's rifle lowered, but not in surrender. In disbelief. His face cracked with something that looked like fear. You've turned them against us. I've shown them there's another way. Tahu stepped forward, finally, and stood between Donna and the men. "This is the last time," he said. "Do not come again." There was nothing in his tone but finality. Eli spat in the dirt, but it sounded like defeat. He turned and mounted his horse, the others following. No flames. No shots. Only hoofbeats fading into the dusk. When the dust settled, Donna let her breath out slowly. The children ran to her. She knelt to greet them, one on each shoulder, one tugging her sleeve. Tahu watched from a few feet away, a quiet curve to his lips. Later that evening, after the children had been sent home with jam and stories and reminders to come early for class, Donna and Tahu sat beneath the stars. The world felt larger again, but no longer empty. He took her hand. She leaned into his shoulder. "You were brave," he said. "I was tired of being silent." They watched the fire crackle in its pit, its light dancing across their faces. Not the desperate heat of survival anymore, but warmth chosen, built, tended. She looked at him and saw not the man who found her in the snow, but the one who stayed through every thaw, every silence, every storm. "I think of the fire that stayed," she said softly. Tahu looked at her, not just with love, but with something deeper. Recognition. "Yes," he said. "We are." And far off in the prairie, the wind carried their quiet triumph like a hymn not meant to be sung loudly, but remembered. Just seeing. Mariah tried to form words, but her throat refused. Instead, she nodded, once barely. He responded not with speech, but with movement. He stood, stepped back, and turned toward the trees. Then paused. Waited. She looked down at Jacob, his tiny hand curled near his cheek like a question. She lifted him, slow and trembling, and followed the stranger into the woods. They walked through the deep hush of dusk, branches creaking like old bones. The man made no sound, but he knew the land like it was stitched into his soles. He led them to a cabin, hidden, stone-rooted, wrapped in ivy and thyme. Smoke drifted from its chimney in a lazy spiral, the scent of pine and something warm within. He opened the door and stepped aside. She entered. The warmth met her like an embrace she hadn't earned. Inside, a fire, a wool rug, shelves of herbs and jars, a small bed and a pile of pelts in the corner. Everything neat. Everything lived in. A cradle sat near the hearth, empty but not abandoned. He closed the door behind them and stoked the fire. Mariah laid Jacob down on the pelts, tucked what was left of the blanket around him, and sat beside him, legs folded beneath her. Her fingers trembled, but her spine did not. The man handed her a bowl of stew, roots and meat and something fragrant. Again, she fed Jacob first. Again, he watched silent. Only once the child had eaten and slept did she taste the food. Warmth bloomed across her tongue like a second sun. She did not cry. She had passed the place where tears lived. He sat across from her, back straight, hands resting on his knees. The firelight carved soft shadows across his cheeks. She did not ask his name. He did not offer it. But in that quiet place, among the cedar-scented air and flicker of flame, something passed between them. Not language, not promise, but the echo of shared survival. Outside, the wind curled around the cabin, softer now, as if the earth itself had exhaled. As if, somewhere beneath the layers of silence, it knew something had begun. Snow fell like sifted flour, gentle and unhurried, covering the world in a hush too deep for words. Morning light pooled soft across the cabin's windows, filtered through frost-laced glass like a secret kept from time. Inside, breath rose in silver curls above sleeping mouths. The fire in the hearth had died down to embers, but the warmth lingered, tucked into corners and woven through wool and wood. Mariah stirred first. Her body ached with the dull rhythm of survival, but not the same desperation as before. It was a quieter pain now, sore muscles, a bruised rib, the kind of ache that reminded her she was still alive. She blinked at the rafters, unfamiliar and dark against the dawn. For a heartbeat, she didn't know where she was. Then Jacob shifted beside her with a small sigh, his tiny hand brushing her arm, and memory returned like a tide. Smoke, frost, the man from the woods. She sat up slowly. The pelts beneath them were thick and soft, stitched with care and many seasons. Jacob lay curled like a pup, lips parted in sleep, cheeks pink with warmth. She brushed a hand over his curls and rose. The cabin was small, but carefully kept. A shelf ran along one wall, lined with dried herbs and bundles of sage, roots hanging from string. The hearth held a blackened kettle nestled over coals, the scent of broth and cedar mingling in the air. She moved like someone entering a chapel, cautious, reverent, unsure what could be touched. He was outside. Through the window she saw him, bare arms splitting wood with slow precision, each motion clean, controlled. His breath marked the cold like smoke from a pipe. He moved not like a man making firewood, but like someone tending something sacred. She watched him a moment, something in her chest tightening, then loosening again. When he returned, he brought the smell of snow and pine with him. He placed the split logs by the hearth without looking at her. Then, finally, he spoke. "Eat." His voice was deep but quiet, like gravel softened by years of water. She nodded. Still unsure if she trusted her own voice, she ladled broth into a wooden bowl and sat beside Jacob, sipping slowly, letting warmth unfurl inside her. It wasn't seasoned like her mother's used to be, but it was real, honest. It tasted of roots and game and someone's care. He moved through the room, without rush or noise, gathering herbs, checking the latch on the door, tying back the hide that served as a curtain. She watched him not like a woman curious about a man, but like someone trying to learn a language spoken only through movement. He did not explain himself. He did not ask questions. And yet she did not feel unwelcome. Days passed in measured silence. Jacob grew stronger. His color returned. He laughed again, chasing his own shadow in the slivers of light that danced on the floor. The man carved him a small bird from wood, sleek and rounded, and left it on the fur blanket without a word. Jacob found it in the morning and carried it everywhere. Mariah tried to help. At first, he refused with a glance, not unkind but firm. But one morning, she rose before him and began sweeping the floor with the worn broom tucked behind the door. He didn't stop her. That evening, he gave her a basket of dried juniper and showed her how to tie it in bundles. Still, few words passed between them. She learned him in fragments. He rose with the sun, slept lightly, walked without sound. He had a scar running from collarbone to shoulder, like a crooked river. His hands were large but careful. His face unreadable, except when he watched Jacob. That gaze held something older than sorrow, softer than regret. She waited for him to ask, to wonder who she was, where she came from, why her eyes flinched at sudden noise. But he never did. His silence was not a wall, but a space. He made room, not demands. And in that room, she began to breathe again. One evening, as snow whispered against the windows, Jacob asleep on the floor with a wooden bird tucked beneath his chin, she found the courage to ask, "Why did you help us?" He did not look up from a feather he was shaping. "Because you were dying," he said simply. She nodded. It was the only answer she trusted. Later, she tried again. "What's your name?" This time he paused. Looked up. "Taenka." The syllables were heavy, drawn from deeper roots. "What does it mean?" "Bull elk," he answered, then resumed carving, as if that explained everything and nothing. She held the name in her mouth like a warm stone. "Mariah," she offered. He nodded once, as though he had known already. Time passed unmeasured. Snow deepened around the cabin. Outside, the world bristled with silence. Inside, a rhythm settled. Not comfort exactly, but something more honest. A truce with grief. Mariah learned the stove's temperament. How to listen for wind through the cracks. How to hang herbs, just so. She found her fingers returning to old knowledge, mending, stitching, weaving quiet usefulness into the corners of the home. She never asked how long they could stay. He never hinted they should leave. One afternoon, while Jacob napped and the stew simmered, she found herself beside Taenka at the fire. He handed her a piece of leather and a needle. "Teach me," she said. His eyes flicked to her hands, then back to the leather. He showed her the first stitch. They worked in silence. Eventually, she spoke. "You lost someone." He did not stop, but his shoulders shifted. "Yes." She waited. "Wife. Child. Long ago." Her breath caught, not from surprise, but from recognition. Grief called to grief. She reached for the needle again. "I'm sorry." He didn't respond, but his next stitch was slower, more careful. Later that night, Jacob woke, crying from a dream. Mariah rose to soothe him, but before she could cross the room, Tawanka was there, kneeling beside him, humming low and strange, a tune without shape. Jacob calmed, drifted again. The man tucked the blanket tight and rose without looking back. Mariah watched from the doorway. She did not speak. She did not need to. When the snow melted and the first shy green returned to the world, Mariah stepped outside with bare feet. The cold was softer now. She closed her eyes and let the wind touch her face. It smelled of thaw and loam and something beginning. Inside, Tawanka was teaching Jacob how to shape stone. The boy's laugh bubbled like spring water. Mariah watched through the open door. Her heart ached, but not in the way it used to. This ache was wide, like a riverbank. It held space. She stood at the edge of the woods and breathed in. Behind her, the cabin crackled with life. Ahead, the forest whispered of paths not yet taken. And somewhere in the quiet between them, she felt the truth settle in her bones. They were no longer simply surviving. They were staying. Spring unfolded like a whispered promise, tentative, unsure, then suddenly bold. Snow melted into the earth, feeding roots that had slept all winter. Pale green shoots nudged their way through softened soil, and the river nearby began to sing again, louder with each passing day. The world was waking, and so was she. Mariah stood beneath a cottonwood tree, the hem of her skirt damp with morning dew. In her hands, a basket of nettles and wild onions gathered along the edge of the woods. Jacob chased sunlight through the trees, laughing as he dodged between trunks, his wooden bird tucked under one arm like a companion. He had grown, taller, surer, a little bolder. The fear in his eyes had faded, replaced with a curiosity that bloomed like dandelions in his smile. She watched him with quiet wonder. It amazed her how quickly children healed, how they could find joy again in the same world that had once broken them. From the corner of her eye, she caught a flicker of movement. Tawanka, tending the garden bed near the cabin. He moved with that same careful grace, hands deep in the soil, sleeves rolled to his elbows. His silence had never felt empty. It was a silence that listened, that noticed. Over the last weeks, it had begun to feel less like a wall and more like a rhythm, something she could learn to breathe in. They had not spoken much about the past. Some wounds did not ask to be named. But in the hush between chores and the soft flicker of firelight, something had begun to grow between them, something unspoken, but alive. That afternoon, they worked side by side beneath the warm stretch of sun. He showed her how to plant wild sage, how to space the roots so they wouldn't crowd each other. She listened, her hands moving with his, her shadow overlapping his on the ground. Once, their fingers brushed in the soil. Both paused. Neither pulled away. Later, she boiled the onions, stirred them into the rabbit stew. He tasted it and nodded once, approval without embellishment. It meant more than praise ever had. One evening, she found him sitting by the river, sharpening a blade. She approached without sound, settled on a stone beside him. The water murmured past, swollen and restless. She didn't look at him as she spoke. "I used to be afraid all the time. Even before the in-laws turned me out. Even when I was married, I carried fear like it was stitched into my skin." His hand stilled. "He wasn't cruel," she added quickly. "Just small. Always needing me to be smaller, quieter, easier." She plucked a blade of grass and twisted it between her fingers. "Sometimes I wonder if that's why his family hated me so much. Because I didn't disappear after he died." Tawanka said nothing, but his stillness was different now. Not passive, listening. After a long silence, he spoke. "My wife laughed like fire. Loud, bright, everywhere at once. She named our son after the wind, said it would carry him where she couldn't." Mariah turned to him, eyes wide. "What happened?" He glanced at the water. His voice was steady. "They died the winter soldiers came. Fever took her. Then him. I buried them under the cottonwood before the snow thickened." After that, I stayed. Not to forget, just to remember differently. She reached across the space between them, touched his wrist lightly. You remember them in everything you do, she said. I see it. He didn't speak again, but his hand turned beneath hers, their palms brushing, callus against callus, warmth exchanged without need for words. That night, the air shifted. They didn't touch again. Not yet. But the quiet between them felt full now, like the hush before rain, or the pause at the top of a breath. Something was waiting. A few days later, the past came knocking. She was hanging herbs in the doorway when she saw him, riding in from the edge of the trees, rifle slung across his back, face too familiar in its shape. One of the in-laws. The younger brother, Clayton. Same narrowed eyes, same cruel twist at the mouth. He dismounted without greeting. Jacob, playing by the cabin wall, froze. Mariah stepped between them without thought. Clayton grinned, though it didn't touch his eyes. Well, look who crawled out of the ash heap. Thought you were dead. She didn't answer. Her heart thudded, but her face held still. He looked past her toward the door. That your brat? He's got a claim, you know. Inheritance. My father didn't want to go into a squatter woman and some half-wild kid. Mariah stood taller. You abandoned us, she said. Left us to die. Clayton shrugged. We assumed you would. Figured it'd save us the trouble of lawyers. A shadow fell across the doorway. Tynka stepped out, wordless. His gaze locked with Clayton's, unreadable but heavy. Clayton laughed brittle. You got yourself a new man already? Guess grief don't stick too long out here. Mariah didn't flinch. But Jacob crept behind her, clutching her skirt. Tynka didn't raise his voice. He simply stepped closer, until the air between them tensed like a drawn bowstring. You will leave, he said. Clayton's smile faltered. Or what? Tynka didn't move. The land remembers. Something in his tone made even the trees seem to pause. Clayton shifted in his boots, muttered something about returning with papers, and climbed back on his horse. He didn't look back. When he was gone, Mariah exhaled shakily. He'll come again, she said. Tynka nodded. Let him. That night, Jacob clung to her. She rocked him gently, murmuring songs her mother used to sing. Tynka sat nearby, tending the fire. His presence felt like armor. After Jacob slept, Mariah turned to him. I'm not afraid anymore, she said quietly. He met her eyes. You shouldn't be. Outside, the wind shifted, smelling of rain and dust and something older. Inside, the fire crackled softly, and something long buried stirred to life. They sat together on the floor, side by side, the silence between them not empty, but waiting, an ember ready to catch. And far beyond the trees, thunder rolled like a promise yet to be kept. The earth held its breath. It was the kind of stillness that came before a storm, not loud, but deep. The hush that settled when the wind waited, and even birds tucked their wings in silence. Mariah felt it in her marrow as she stood in the cabin's doorway, a ladle stilled mid-stir in the soup pot, her eyes tracing the thin cloud of dust rising on the trail beyond the trees. They had come back. 3 riders this time. Not just Clayton, but his elder brother, Warren, and another man she didn't recognize. Broad-chested, badge glinting faintly at his hip. The smell of horses and arrogance reached her before their words did. Jacob was inside, painting with berry juice and a flat stone on bark. He didn't notice the threat yet. That was Mercy. She stepped out, apron still tied, hands at her sides. She didn't shake. She didn't speak first. Warren was the same as he ever was, smug and sun-creased, thick with the confidence of men who confuse bloodline for righteousness. Mariah, he said, voice dry and sharp. You've made yourself real comfortable. Mighty ungrateful, considering who you owe. She tilted her chin. I owe you nothing. Clayton chuckled, still smug. We're not here for talk. That boy belongs to our name, and our name's worth land. The third man stepped forward then, Deputy Holt, if she remembered right. His eyes flicked over the cabin, to the furs drying on the line, the gentle smoke curling from the chimney. Ma'am, he said, as if civility could make cruelty clean. We've received word your son may be in the care of an individual with no legal authority. We're here to reclaim the child for his rightful family." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Taanka stepped into view from the woods, bow slung across his back, a basket of roots in one hand. He walked without haste, but every line of his body hummed with restrained purpose, like a mountain that had decided to move. The horses shifted beneath the riders. He walked past Mariah, placed the basket at her feet, and turned to face them. "There is no child to reclaim," he said, voice low but clear. "Only a mother. Only a boy. You abandoned both." Warren sneered. "You're not the law out here." Taanka looked at him, long and still. "No. I am the land, and it does not forget trespass." Clayton's hand hovered near his rifle. The deputy cleared his throat. "Let's keep this civil." Mariah stepped forward then. Her heart was pounding, but her voice came calm, flat as hammered steel. "Let me speak plain, since you came all this way." She took a slow breath, eyes locked on Warren. "You left us to die. You stripped your brother's child of food, warmth, safety, and you did it like it was routine. You thought the world would finish the job for you." "He's blood," Warren snapped. "He's mine," she said, and her voice did not waver. "And blood is nothing when the heart is empty." The wind shifted. A branch creaked. No one moved. Taanka's hand rested at his side. He was not armed, but he didn't need to be. The air around him did the work, a weight that reminded the world it stood on old bones. "Leave," he said. One word. Final. Warren shifted in the saddle. "We'll be back with writs. A judge. We'll take him legal, if not today." Mariah stepped forward again, and this time, her voice broke something open. "No, you won't." She reached into the folds of her apron, pulled out a folded slip of paper. She held it out. "This is a record of abandonment, filed by a circuit rider passing through last winter. Witnessed and signed." He sent it east. "It's law now." Warren stared at the paper like it might bite him. "You think some drifter's letter means a thing?" She looked him dead in the eye. "It means Jacob is mine. Entirely. And it means if you set one foot past that tree line again, it's not just a man or a mother you answer to." Her voice lowered. "It's the land. And the land has already made its decision." Clayton cursed, turned his horse hard, rein snapping. Warren followed, spitting into the dirt as he rode. The deputy lingered, uncertain. His eyes flicked again to the boy's paintings drying on a string. He looked older in that moment, smaller. He touched the brim of his hat to her. Then he, too, turned away. The dust of their passing rose and settled. Mariah exhaled, then folded the paper and tucked it away again. Her hands trembled after they stopped being useful. Taanka did not touch her. He did not speak. But he stepped beside her, and in that small act, she felt everything she needed. Inside, Jacob ran to her, wide-eyed, unsure. She knelt and pulled him close. "It's over," she whispered into his hair. "They won't take you. Ever." That night, the stars came out early. The fire in the hearth cracked gently, casting long shadows along the walls. Jacob slept beneath the quilt she had patched with her own hands, wooden bird still clutched in his fist. She sat by the fire, shawl wrapped around her shoulders, watching the flames dance like memory. Taanka sat across from her, the light painting his face in flickers. She studied him a long while before speaking. "I was always taught that love looked like safety, but I think that's only part of it. I think it's also seeing someone choose peace every day, even when they could fight, even when they carry grief." He met her gaze. "You do that," she said. He looked away for a moment. When he looked back, something in his eyes had settled, like a storm passing beyond the hills. "So do you," he said. She rose, crossed the space between them, and sat beside him. Their shoulders touched. She reached for his hand. This time he took it. No need for words. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees, no longer warning, no longer wary. The fire burned low, steady. Beneath the floor, the earth did not sleep. It remembered every footstep, every promise. And above them, stars wheeled in the quiet sky, bearing witness not to a love born in ease, but in endurance. in becoming, in fire that had waited patiently beneath still earth.